Well, I want to welcome you all who are watching to our Chesterfield Counseling Associates podcast series. My name is Sonia Myrer, and I get to be the host of this show. And as you can tell, we're attempting something new today because we're actually recording a video version of this podcast. And so you listeners have the option of being listeners or viewers or both, if you like. And we hope that you enjoy this new format. So, this podcast is focused on all issues regarding mental health. And I've had experts on this podcast, and we've talked about OCD, and we've talked about marriage counseling, we've talked about adoption and postpartum. So, we're hearing from a variety of people. But I'm really giddy about today's show for two reasons. One is because the two of us on this podcast show who are a little more seasoned, and I'll let you guess who those are. We are going to be talking to two sort of newer comers to the profession. And that's always fun for us to kind of hear what's going on. But to make it even sweeter, the two of us who are doing the interviewing of the younger people are actually the two moms of the two young men on this show. So Sue Melorano and I are going to have a chance to talk to our young men, Drew and Devin, who are also in this mental health profession. And so we thought this might make for a lively conversation. We're going to talk a little bit about their journey into counseling, as well as what it was like to be raised in a home with a mental health professional, if you will. They're going to share a few stories. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how our experience in the field has affected our parenting, and then what it's like to have a child who's in the field as well. So let's go ahead and get to it. Sue, why don't you just start if you don't mind, and then we'll go to Drew and to Devin, and just tell us a little bit about yourself, not the professional part yet, we'll get to that, but just for the people who are looking, what is it that they should know about you?
Okay, let's see. I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I'm a mom of three. Drew is my oldest, and then I have two daughters, Sarah and Emily. So I'm a 21, 23, 25-year-old. I married my college sweetheart, Mike. We both graduated from Ohio State University. And I was thinking about this for the intro, the timing of this. So Mike and I are Ohio State Buckeyes. Our two daughters are Mizzou Tigers. And in a couple weeks, Ohio State is going to be playing Mizzou in the Cotton Bowl. So we are going to be a house divided. And I think we have Drew on our side. He's a Buckeye.
Well, we're a little bit of a podcast divided too. Devin will tell you in just a second where he went to school, and we'll add another element to that.
Right.
Okay. So, and Sue and Drew and I actually are all in the same practice. So Sue sits over on the other side of the hallway as Drew. So Drew, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, if you will?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Drew Melorano. Sue is my mom. I am a former college football player from the University of Dayton, small Division I school up in Ohio. So I do lean more towards the Buckeyes. Sorry, Devin. I have a real passion for sports. Obviously, I love football, but I still love watching basketball, golf. I like to play golf, even though I'm not that good. I also love exercising, whether that's lifting weights, running, walking, just moving my body. Then one of the other things I actually really love is puzzles. I like doing like Sudoku, like math puzzles, as well as like word puzzles, like Wordle. Those are some of the things that, I like, and it's a little bit about me.
Those things that make you cool. All right. Devin, would you go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, shoot. So to follow that up, Drew, I don't like any of the mentally challenging things. I like things that are very mentally easy. So before I get to that, my name's Devin. Like my mom said, I'm her son. I'm her middle. I actually, contrary to everyone else on this podcast, live up here in Michigan. I'm in the greater Detroit area, about 20 minutes outside of downtown. I went to the University of Michigan. Go Blue! I believe Blue was screaming at the top of my lungs when they beat Ohio State this year. Number one seed for the first time since '97. Boy, I cannot wait for the Rose Bowl. I'm excited. Bama looks intimidating, but hey, I love Michigan. Love it up here. I also got my master's in social work from the University of Michigan, and I was also on the track and field team there. I graduated and I actually spent 2 years down in Baylor, at Baylor University down in Waco, Texas. Ended up transferring to U of M in 2018. So I've kind of been all over the map in terms of where school and running has brought me. But it wound me up here, where I also got to meet my very beautiful and very intelligent wife, Sarah. Her and I live here. We were just recently married in July, and we live up here. She's in law school. She just finished her first semester of law school yesterday, which is awesome. And we have our cat, our little tuxedo cat, Bruce. And as I said with Drew, I like to do things that are just so not mentally taxing. If I'm not training, I'm training a lot right now because I'm training for a marathon. If I'm not running, I'm usually just doing something that involves me being prone, either laying on the couch, laying in my bed, and usually watching something on the TV. So that's a little bit about me.
I love it. You guys have a similar background there in some ways. So let's talk about how you actually became interested in a career in mental health. Just briefly, like what path did you take? Devin, you mentioned that you went through the program of social work. And then I want to ask you to add on to that. What kind of clients do you typically see? So why don't we just go ahead and go in the same order? Oh, I forgot to introduce myself.
Yeah, I was going to say, what about you?
I'm your host, and that's where I keep it. I'll keep it really brief. I am actually a professional coach. So I work with people who are in recovery, who are stuck in difficult relationships. I have years of experience in working with the recovery community, people who are struggling with addiction or someone else's addiction. I was part of a team that created a ministry around recovery, and I have been doing this kind of work here. I host a workshop for about, I would say 5 to 10 years, depending on where you want to count the start time. So I have three wonderful kiddos. Devin, like he said, is my middle, and I live down here in the St. Louis area, and I am just grateful for this morning. Okay, so Sue, we'll go to you. Tell us about how you came into this field. How long have you been in it? And what are the clients that you typically see?
Okay. So I was at Ohio State in undergrad during the 80s, and this was really not a field I was aware of. I just didn't think it was much of a thing. So I spent about almost a decade in sort of an HR, corporate training, organization development role in the corporate world. And what happened was, I don't know how it happened, but people would just come to me, executives, other employees, and they would just confide in me about their work struggles or their frustrations with colleagues or their boss or their employees, and then they would start talking to me about their personal lives. And I became kind of a pseudo therapist. And at one of my jobs, I had a boss who knew of this LPC, mental health master's level therapist role. So LPC means licensed professional counselor. And he told me about it. And I was like, oh my gosh, that sounds perfect. It sounds like what I'm already doing, but I, could get actually trained in it. And so I took the entrance exam at Xavier University in Cincinnati and got in, and I enrolled as a part-time clinical mental health student working toward my master's program while I was still working. Drew was 2 years old at the time. It was in the late 90s. But anyway, and then it took me a while to complete it because we kept relocating and I kept having babies. So it wasn't until, a few years later that I completed it. And then you have to do, once you do kind of your 3-year master's work, then you have to do another 2 years of what I call like a residency, which is our version of getting licensed, working toward licensure, where we are able to see clients, but under the supervision of a licensed, either a licensed psychologist or another licensed mental health professional. So I did that, and I've been in the field for over 20 years as a licensed professional counselor in private practice the whole time. And I see my area of emphasis was marriage and family. So I tend to see a lot of couples. I tend to see a lot of families. I work a lot with encouraging parents. It's hard to be a parent, I think, these days. Maybe it's always been hard, but it's even harder, I think. And then I also work with individuals, adults, like college age up, who are dealing with any of the mood disorders, depression, anxiety, grief. I work with people with a lot of relational conflict, holiday time usually brings some of that out.
Mhm. Yeah.
And then I also tend to work with people who are going through life transitions. I've personally moved, relocated 5 times with my family, so I have an understanding for what that's like to rebuild a life, make job changes, connect in a new community. So yeah, that's kind of my story.
Awesome. Wonderful, wonderful. All right, Drew, how about you? How did you enter this field, and what kind of clients do you see?
Yeah, so my story is not as complicated as my mom's.
Yeah,
I think
yes.
from a really early age, I kind of knew what I wanted to do. So I was obviously really fortunate to be able to watch and kind of observe like my mom in this field. And she would always talk about, you know, how fulfilling this job was, how satisfying it is to work with clients and to see people, you know, overcome these problems and, you know, overcome this adversity. So I always thought that was really cool just to be able to have that kind of impact, you know, in somebody's life. So from an early on, I was kind of interested. And around middle school and high school, I realized like, okay, this is what I'm going to do, you know, with my life. And after high school, I went to Dayton and got a degree in psychology, got my bachelor's in psychology, and then went right into Lindenwood to get my master's. So I've completed that. I've graduated, I've completed my internship, and I'm now a PLPC, the provisionally licensed one. And hopefully in 2 years, I'll become licensed. But yeah, my mom has had such a big role, I think, in my path as a counselor. She's been able to kind of walk me through, you know, what it is I need to do, what I need to complete, you know, what classes to take, how to maybe, you know, be successful in some of these classes. So I've relied on her heavily throughout my path and throughout my journey as a counselor. I think in terms of the clients I see, it's pretty specific. So it's usually young males, anywhere between like 7 to like 27. That's kind of my range. And you know, I'll see clients for a variety of different, you know, general mental health problems, you know, anger, anxiety, depression, stress, you know, all those kinds of ones. But I also do work with some athletes specifically on, you know, performance anxiety, you know, mental blocks, injuries. Confidence is a big one, you know, we work with. And another one is just managing dynamics within a team. And managing, you know, those kinds of relationships. So that's pretty much who I see. Looking to expand a little bit more, probably, but for now, that's kind of my sweet spot.
Drew was actually on a podcast we did earlier in the year with a group of coaches, and that's really interesting too. The other thing I'll tell you about Drew is that more often than not, when I'm walking to and from to my car, he's out in the parking lot throwing a football around with a young kid. And, you know, the ability to connect with someone young and do something they love physically for a while first to open up the door is not something everybody, my clients don't want to go out and throw the football with me. I mean, go figure, but he has that going for him. So, okay. Devin, how about you?
Yeah, shoot. I want to stop following up Drew. He has all these really impressive answers. Like,
okay, next time around, we'll let you go first.
I see why you call him like the best count. Yeah, I get it. Like, Drew always sound like the man. So again, maybe in contrast to Drew, I had no idea what I wanted to do growing up at all. Mom, you know, a couple like very, very long time ago, you made me do like those career like exams or like exploration like tests to try and figure out like what you'd be interested in. And, you know, also maybe being the burden of being a middle child, my older brother was completely opposite to me in that he knew what colleges he wanted to go on to tour when he was about 12. He had his whole life figured out when he was very young. And I was very much the opposite of that. I said, I'll just kind of let it all come to me.
Yeah,
and
your assessment said you were supposed to be a park ranger.
Yeah. It was like a doctor working in forestry or a park ranger. And here I am. So again, to that point, Drew, had no clue what I wanted to do. It was kind of all over the place. So essentially with that, I, you know, most of my life and my career choices were kind of guided by sport. like COVID obviously was a very difficult thing for a lot of people, and it was difficult for me too. But one of the things that I'm super grateful for was that it allowed me to get my master's while still running, because it gave me that extra year of eligibility. So went to Baylor for 2 years, was studying psychology. I went in pre-med. I went in pre-med biology, and quickly found out was not cut out for that whatsoever. Changed to psychology, transferred, went to then at Michigan, started a program called, it's far too fancy a title. It was called Biopsychology, Cognition, and Neuroscience, but essentially just a psychology degree, very, very much similar to that. Went and got my master's degree in social work. So I'm now an LLMSW, similar to Drew, still working in that, working towards licensure. Hopefully I'll take my exam in the fall of this coming year. But I didn't figure out that I wanted to do my master's of social work until really my last year in school, because I was graduating in 2020. And I said, well, obviously, you know, the pandemic had shut down most things, and I was still granted some of that eligibility back. So I said, well, what's a way that I can do a 2-year master's? And social work popped up, and I said, you know, that probably would work out pretty well. So I ended up doing the master's of social work and ended up really liking the work, and specifically took a track that would kind of help me most get prepared for this kind of work. The interpersonal pathway is what it was called, and kind of just fell into this space. Drew, similar to maybe you, I felt like it was something that I was attuned to and was interested in for a very long time, but was never something that I was like, that's what I want to do. I never really had that. I kind of just, again, figured things out as I went, which to my mother's chagrin, I imagine was probably stressful at times, but you know, kind of the way that I went about doing it. So that's kind of how I got into this space. Last year, actually, so this is my second job now that I've had since graduating. I graduated in 22. Last year, I worked for a telehealth addiction recovery program. It was also based out of Ann Arbor, Michigan. Found out that the telehealth space strictly wasn't for me. I wanted to be more in person and have that kind of not only the interaction with my clients in person, but also just like the team-based atmosphere in person that meant a lot to me. So now in this new position, I've been here since August, so about five months now, or so 4 months or now. And that kind of brings me then to my clients. Similar to Drew in many ways, a lot of men, which I think is a really cool thing. I think it's really awesome to to have the privilege of entering into those kind of conversations with men. But my age range and my clientele, I feel like, are kind of all over the place right now. Since I started in August, my main goal was just to increase my caseload. So essentially anyone who was coming in the door who had a general interest in therapy, I was kind of getting matched with, which very much so it broadens the horizon of who I'm seeing right now. No day is the same, which I think is really cool. But similar to Drew, I'm kind of trying to figure out who are the niche environments, or like the environments in which I feel like I work with and connect with the best. Sue, what you talked about with having those kind of pockets of people, that's definitely what I'm striving for. But right now I'm kind of still in that exploration phase of trying to figure out who that is and how I can best operate. But seeing men right now, seeing people of all different kind of age ranges. I have a 13-year-old and I have a 55-year-old, kind of everywhere in between. So I'm kind of all over the place, but that's a little bit about who I am and what kind of brought me to this space.
Awesome. All right. Now, I'm going to send it back to you then, Devin, and then to Drew, because I want to ask this question, and go deep or don't go deep at all. Totally fine.
Right.
What was it like growing up in a home with someone who had a passion for mental health? And I'll just share with you real quick. I am not a therapist, and I started out my career actually working in the realm of education. So I've always worked with families and kids. I was in family ministry for many years, but then kind of fell in love with this coaching. And so my clients are also kind of all over the map, but they have a little bit of a red thread. I was not raised in a home where anybody talked about mental illness, feelings, emotions, zero. So I think I made it a big deal to talk more about that. But I'd like to hear from my son, your experience growing up in a home with someone who kind of maybe overdid it sometimes. I don't know.
Yeah, no, to your point, you never overdid it, but I will admit at times it was absolutely infuriating because and it was infuriating in a good way, because you challenged us. And I think that that's like one of the things that I feel like I carry forward now into this space of working as a professional here is you always challenge us to go a little bit deeper than what we were presenting, right? Like, Drew, I'm sure you can relate to this being in a sport environment, especially around a bunch of boys in sport, right? Like the emotional intelligence isn't quite always there. It's like, how do you feel? It's like, I'm pissed or I'm angry or that sucked, right? And while it's so valid, because usually that's a pretty good way of describing some of the experiences that we probably had to go through grueling practices and tournaments and all that kind of stuff. Mom, you always challenged me to just go a little bit deeper, right? Like, okay, it sucked. Why? Right? Like, or like, what was so challenging about it? Like, let's get specific. Let's talk. What are some words, right? Feelings wheel words. Like, no, the outer ring of the feelings wheel. What was it? What is actually going on? And the reason I said it was infuriating at times is because sometimes I just wanted to just be mad, right? And like stay in that inner ring of just the very basic descriptors. But when you pushed us and challenged us, it definitely had a really good, long-lasting impact. And I'm very grateful for it because that's not a normal thing. And I continue to realize that more and more as I work with clients is the challenge to be very in tune with emotions is not a very normal thing, especially in today's day and age. It's obviously getting better with more access and less stigma, but it's still kind of uncommon. And when I was growing up, that was a little bit difficult because it made it a little bit more challenging to connect with people, especially with young, maybe emotionally stunted boys. Right? Like
Developing. They're still developing.
Right. Of course. And I'm not trying to sound cocky or arrogant in that way. Like if anything, like it sometimes made me feel strange because I'm trying to have these conversations with them. And it's like, no, like, we didn't quite connect that way all the time. And that to me was always a little bit perplexing. Because I was like, well, don't you want to talk about your feelings sometimes? Or like, but it just didn't quite happen that way. Which again, at the time was a little bit challenging, but now as I realized as I grow older was super beneficial. So growing up with you in that space was at times challenging, but it was challenging because you pushed me. And now in the long run, it's only a thing that I reflect back on with gratitude because it helps me to not only be better for myself, but also be there for my clients as best as I can. So.
Well, you're very kind and thank you. I appreciate that honesty. So Drew, I don't know if you grew up with a feelings wheel in your hand, a feelings wheel, but I gave them to all my kids before they left for school. I was like, you're going to need this. Make sure you take this with me. So you mentioned already that one positive thing about growing up with your mom was from a professional standpoint, you got to hear. Are there other things that you remember that are a little bit like maybe what Devin is describing? Like what was life actually like with a mom who was a therapist?
Yeah. So I can totally relate to like putting language to feelings. That was a big thing, like in our house, like being able to fully describe and explain kind of what's going on. I think one of the things, I really remember about my mom is how much understanding she would always give, to me and, my sisters, whatever situation, we came to her with. I feel like she would always try and understand everything from a lot of different angles. I always remember feeling extremely comfortable, with my mom to talk with her about anything that I had going on in my life. And I know that's just an essential kind of quality to have as a therapist. And I got to be, lucky enough to experience that kind of on a daily basis. The other thing that I think my mom did an excellent job of, and I think this kind of stems from being in the mental health field too, is just she had a natural curiosity, like in my life and, in what I was doing. We always like to joke around about how many questions are asked. But I truly appreciated that. And I think that made our relationship, stronger as a result. I mean, she'd always ask me, how was your day? What's going on? What were the highlights? What were the, some of the bad parts about it? So we were just in constant communication. And I think just having her invested and like genuinely interested in my life was awesome. So, and I will say one of the things that was kind of annoying, I'll give you mine. Growing up, we weren't allowed to have video games. That was the big thing. Like she was like a hard no on all of it. She's like, you need to go play outside, go be with your friends. And I was like, well, all my friends just play video games. just let me have these video games. And she was, really adamant about not giving into the video games. And for the longest time, I never understood it. And I think it was in one of my first or second classes in psychology. They were just talking about like how, video games can be problematic. And I was like, oh, maybe that's why, she, holds that, belief so firmly. So I ended up, understanding it, later in life. But yeah, that's just a little bit about, my mom and what it was like growing up with a mom who was in the mental health field.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And you boys are so sweet. Okay, so Sue,
Gosh.
as a parent, having the whole mental health background, sometimes that can be a really great thing. Sometimes it can be stressful. What, just briefly, how did your profession influence your parenting? And I'm sure it did. Can you think of some things in particular?
Yeah. Okay. So one of the first things I'd say is my radar was always up because while the kids were little, I tended to work a lot with an adolescent population.
Mm.
And they tell me everything, my clients. And so they told me all their secrets. They told me all the ways they lied to their parents, how they hid and snuck their electronics all through the night, would be texting or on their video gaming. So I'd come home and I'd be like, I don't believe anything you guys are saying. Like phones, I'm collecting. They go in our room and they would, oh, we're the only ones that have to do this. This is so dumb. I'm like, yeah, sorry, I know too much. So I think that was probably a problem for them, but it's hard when you have that information and that it's possible it could be happening in your own home. I didn't want to be naive, but I'll give you a couple specifics. And listening to you, Drew, those were a couple of the things I had written down. I was big on, I wanted them active. I really wanted them connected with people, playing outside, active, engaged in extracurriculars. And so I did have trouble with, just that idle electronics, gaming stuff, and even TV. We didn't have cable for a couple years. And so they joke about it now, but the kids talk about how they would gather around this little TV we had in our kitchen with an antenna, and they got, like 4 stations, and one of them was PBS. And so they would watch shows like Clifford and Arthur and Sid the Science Kid. And it's a joke now and they laugh about it, but yeah, they really didn't have even cable TV for a long time, but they did play outside a lot, which was awesome. And they read books, and I don't know, but there were 3 things I was so probably strict on. The kids would probably all say. One, what they ate, moving their bodies, and sleep. Those were 3 things I wanted to protect for them. I felt that was my responsibility. And if I didn't do this for them, who was going to do it? Because kids aren't going to do that, protect that for themselves. And I just knew the correlation, Devin, when you were talking before the podcast even started about, what you do on a day-to-day basis, I was like, that I'm so passionate about nutrition and exercise and sleep, because I know the correlation with clean eating and moving your body and getting good sleep, what that has with mood, clarity of thought, outlook, perspective, just health in general. So that's probably something they all would say. And I don't think they loved it at the time, but I think now they appreciate it maybe a little bit more. And they all seem to kind of have absorbed a lot of those same habits. I asked my husband about this, what does he remember? And he said, and this is what Drew was talking about, that I tended to not overreact and be very like the kids felt like they could come to me and tell me anything, and they did. And sometimes as a parent, that is not the easiest thing, to have your kids tell you everything. And inside, I might feel sick to my stomach and like have to, okay, so get it together and just listen, ask questions. So I didn't want them to know how hard it was for me to hear some of the mistakes they were making or some of the choices they were making. But I really wanted to reinforce that they were being honest and that they were telling me things. And I wanted to have that open, connected dialogue. So that was hard. But I will say, at my youngest, she I don't know how many times she said this, so many times, "Mom, is this how you counsel your clients?" And I would say, "No, I don't care if my clients clean your room. I want you to just go clean your room. Like, I don't need to process that with you about how you're feeling about it. Just go do it." So she would challenge me a lot on that, but I would tell her, "I'm not your therapist. I'm your mom. I'm not your friend." And I just really wanted the kids to be raised with having a hard work ethic, not entitled. I mean, they probably heard me say that word a million times. I don't want you to be entitled. I want you to do your chores. I want you to, think outside of yourself. So yeah, but Drew mentioned some of those things already, and
Yeah.
I'm glad he picked up on that.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love it. I would say a lot of those things too, Sue. Coming out of the world of education and then out of coaching and mental health, I think probably for me, one of the biggest benefits was that I was never afraid to parent. And what I mean by that is I knew that in every stage of their life, they were going to have big emotions. They were going to push boundaries. They were going to push limits. And I knew that. And I knew it wasn't personal, and I knew it wasn't a sign of poor parenting or anything like. I just knew that was appropriate. And so Devin was my very physical child, and his older brother was very verbal, and so he found ways to express himself physically. And when he was tired, for example, he would just start to have a fit. I mean, he would just want to, hit the ground or get out, or he just needed to get out of that feeling. And so I knew that he just needed me to kind of hold him, and then he would fall asleep. It didn't scare me. I didn't ever look at my kid and say, "Oh my gosh, what's going on? Why is this?" I knew it was appropriate. And so I had a lot of sympathy and empathy for my kids growing up because I knew it was hard. And, one of my counselors said to me years ago, when you see a child acting out, that's a sign that they have a need that's not being met. That's not a sign that they're spoiled or anything like that. It's simply a sign that you need to tune into them and say, "Hey, what's going on?" With Devin, it was either food, sleep, or, attention. That was all he needed. It wasn't that hard. And so knowing that it's okay to set boundaries with your kids, but it's also okay to love them when they're, flipping out. That was so helpful for me early on, because then I think later as they became teenagers, we didn't have any big issues. And I'm not saying, really good parents have kids who sometimes go off the rails a little, but we just set that precedent early on. You are loved, you are good. And sometimes you have needs that, you don't know how to express yet. And that doesn't make you bad, but we still have rules and boundaries in this house, and you'll survive. You'll be okay with our rules and boundaries. Devin, when he started driving, had to take a picture of himself with the parent of the house where he was going to every time he went. And he would laugh and roll his eyes at me and say, "Seriously?" The parents don't even think that's cool. But I'm like, I want the parents to know that I care that they're, so you have these quirky rules, but they didn't question them because they knew it was in love. So I think I'm so grateful that I had that background. Otherwise I might have, really freaked out a little bit more. This kid's throwing a tantrum. This kid I don't know how to control him. And I think I knew that was going to be okay. So
Can I jump in?
Please do.
One thing that I'm also hearing amidst everyone, Drew, also as us being one of the kids, and Sue and Mom, also of you guys being parents, is like this notion of being just this word that comes up is just being a container, and how important that is, not only in our profession, but how meaningful that can be as a parent. We know that it's our job to just be a container for someone sometimes, right? Is to show them and to model for them that no matter what you say in this space, I'm gonna be able to handle it. It could be the biggest, most intense emotions that you have ever felt, but if you bring it up here, everything's gonna be okay. The world is not gonna crumble, and I'm not going anywhere, right? And how meaningful that can be for a client. But also when we talk about parenting, right? Drew, you brought that up too, how meaningful that is as a child. To have a parent that you can go to with anything and know that you're going to still be seen, be loved, be accepted. They're not going to change their view of you. How critical that can be. And we talk about the success traits of what does it mean to be a good parent or a successful parent, right? And there's infinite ways to define it and no ways to define it at the same time, right? But more often than not, when I look back on that, it's just the emotional availability. Like whenever I'm, as you said, Mom, whenever I was experiencing turbulence, being able to show up, be emotionally available, and be a container.
Mm.
That is one of the things that I probably would contribute or attribute to most of my success, or my like ability to just be sane in this world. And through that very difficult time of my life was just your ability to show up and do that. And it sounds like, Drew, it was very similar with you and your mom, having that container, just someone who could handle all the emotions that came up. So that was something that I just wanted to touch on, because I was hearing it a lot and I didn't want to let that go, because I think it's crucial. It's crucial to just be able to just be a container for your kid and not go to fixing, right? Like your job as a parent usually isn't to fix things, as you said, Sue, right? Like it's just not. More often than not, a kid just needs to be heard. And I think that's just a huge thing that I think was an awesome thing that you gave me too, Mom. So
Yeah. Love it. And I have two more questions, but that last question, I want you to bring that up again, Devin, which is, what do you want to say to parents who are out there? And one of those things is your kids need to be heard. Yeah. Okay. Really quick, because we're kind of rounding up our time here. And I do want to ask you two more questions. What does it feel like to be in the same profession now? You can just throw out a few emotions. Is there collaboration? Is it sometimes hard? Like when you're together, do you start talking shop, or can you like forget about that? Do you ever like want to kind of therapy your child or your mom even, or, so just really briefly, what is it like? You said all these wonderful good things. What is it like now to be in the same profession? Sue, why don't you start?
Oh my gosh. For me, there's nothing better. I was in this field have been in this field for so many years and always felt so alone in it within my family system. And it wasn't until Drew started going through this that finally, and just hearing him say, oh my gosh, Mom, I get now what you go through every day. I get how hard it can be, how heavy it can be some days. And for so many years, I would just come home and I would just shove it all down and bury it. The nature of confidentiality, obviously I take so seriously, and I never had anywhere to go with it. And now having Drew, it is the best. It is amazing. I love seeing him every day. I love that in a general sense, I can just confide in him maybe in a couple things about the heaviness of a case or a situation. We do get made fun of in our family because my husband said we talk in code, and we're always like hush hush, and we act, he's like, oh my gosh, you guys make such a big deal out of it. You just talk about it, and we won't, because we both really protect confidentiality. But if we're talking about something, and sometimes we share a family, he might see the son and I'm seeing the parents. So sometimes we are collaborating on a case, and if we're talking and then my husband walks in the room or somebody walks in the room, we just stop, and they make fun of us for that. But it has been the best thing. I could never have imagined how satisfying and how much genuine joy it brings me to have this field that I can share with Drew.
Mm-hmm. Drew, what about you?
Yeah.
The fact that we tease you all the time.
Yeah. No, I think it really is one of the coolest things, to be able to work kind of alongside, like a parent, somebody you've looked up to like your entire life. One of the things I'll say just really quickly is, I'd hear from other people like, hey, like your mom is like a really, really good therapist. I was like, yeah, like whatever. But I get to kind of see that now, and I get to understand like what makes her so effective in the field. And it is, I think it's just a really cool feeling to see. I mean, there's a tremendous sense of like pride, that I get to feel just, having a mom like who's really kind of made it in the field and has done really, really well. And I think, I get to benefit from that in a number of different areas. So she referrals, she gives me referrals. Hey, that was awesome. Gives me referrals. It's like she trusts me enough to handle other clients. But I think one of the things that I've really liked is she gives me constant advice on, techniques to use, things to try in a session, like kind of structures. that are effective in a session. I think I've gone to her, so many times just with like questions about, what do you think would be good here? And she always gives me such thoughtful responses. And I'm really appreciative, for that. I think one of the coolest things we've been able to do is like be in a session together, with like working with a family. And it was obviously we were engaged and, we were trying to help this family. But there was a moment, too, I'm like, man, this is one of the coolest things ever to just like be in a professional setting, with somebody you've admired and looked up to your whole life. So to be able to do that, I think was really, really special. And it's just such a cool experience for me.
Oh, that's adorable. It's true also. And I've collaborated with you too, Sue, and I like that very much too. You are a wealth of wisdom for all of us here. Thank you, Drew. I would say that Devin and I are from slightly different mental health fields. So I'm coming in more from the coaching, the addiction side, families, kids, in that arena. I host a boundaries workshop, so I work a lot with people on getting unstuck in relationships. So I'm very much, future forward thinking. Devin is more classically trained, and he's someone who can help me. So what I love about it is that we don't get to collaborate a lot because we're also in two different states, but I get to ask him questions. I get to say, well, so tell me about this. And what does a DMS say about that? A DSM say about that? And I literally go to him and ask him, so from your studies, because he's fresh from school, so he knows all the latest, and he knows more also coming from the School of Social Work. He's more resourced. So I'm enjoying just having some intelligent conversations with him where I can kind of draw on his knowledge a little bit. And again, like you said, so it's just fun to talk the same language. And I don't know, nobody's complained yet that we're annoying. Maybe they have, they just don't say anything, but he's always been the one that people went to. He was always the little counselor, and you were describing that too, Drew. And I love to see him now get to have that in his profession. So Devin, what about you? What do you think it's like to be in the same field as your mama bear?
Yeah, no, and Drew said it best. It's one of the coolest things ever. Yeah, as you said, obviously we are in different spaces, but there's still a lot of overlap, right? Just because we're in different arenas doesn't mean we're in the same, we're not in the same profession in general. And that's just the profession of helping people, right? And I think one of the coolest things for me is when I'm in session with someone and I am speaking to them almost the exact same way that you speak to me, Mom. Like I constantly have those moments where I'm like, dang, that's my mom. Like that's not me talking. It's like my mom is just she's the puppeteer, and I'm just like reciting the things that she's taught me. And I think that's like one of the coolest things, even if it's not collaboration, it's just things that you have taught me over the years that I then get to, again, like I get the nice benefit of like, oh, I seem so smart and so intelligent and so all, aware and all these things for my young age. But usually I follow it up with like, oh, that's not even me. That's just my mom. So like speaking to not only the upbringing, but also just the really cool thing about our collaboration, when we talk about like boundaries, codependency, addiction, right? All those things that you are so well trained in, that's where also I'm learning from you. And even if we're again in two different fields of like work, the overlap is uncanny. And so I always find myself speaking with clients as if it was you speaking to me. And I think that's, again, such a special thing because you taught all those things to me. And now I can use those things that not only have helped me, but I can continue to use them to help other people. And I don't think that's a very common thing, right? Like if you have parents who like work in, similar fields, like, again, not to knock anyone, but like business, right? Like we there's tricks of the trade and you can learn so many things, but like we're attuned again to helping people. And so being able to use the skills that you have like taught me to help other people, that's a pretty cool feeling, I think.
Love it. Okay, so I want to end and I want to flip our perspectives just a little bit. So bear with me. I want to ask you, Devin and Drew, if you had one thing, I'm going to give you a second to think about it, that you would like to tell parents out there. So there are parents out there who are trying to figure out, how to support mental health at home, how to be good parents. And you have gone through being children and have gone through that. I want to ask you just what's one piece of advice you would give a parent out there? And Sue, I want you and I to give one piece of advice to any child or young adult who might be listening. What is it? What is something that I'd love to tell a young adult, maybe about their parents, that would be helpful? Okay, so Deb, do you want to start? If you've got an audience out there, a lot of them are parents who are listening. You've been a child not so long ago, and you work with parents and children. What is something that you think, gosh, parents, I just want you to know this?
Yeah, I still feel like a child at times, more often than not. But so I'll keep it really brief. I know we're running out of time, and I said it earlier. Emotional availability. That's really if I had to give one thing, that would be the thing. Often as a parent, it can be really hard to see your kid going through suffering or adversity or challenges. And you want naturally as a caretaker to fix that for them or to take that away from them, right? But I think one of the biggest things that I feel so grateful for was having the space to share them with you, have that safe space to land, but also have the permission to figure out on my own timeline. That was just crucial in figuring out who I was and the person that I wanted to be. So when we talk about emotional availability, just giving a child space to share, to open up, but supporting them in their own search for resolution rather than giving them the solution that you probably already have, right? Because you've been through it, you have that advice, but allowing them to do that for themselves, I think, is really empowering. So that's what I'd say.
Awesome. Drew, what about you? You've got parents out there listening. You got one message to send them.
Yes, that was a good one. That would probably have been my first option. So that was really well said, man. I think for me, like the other one I would think of is just give them some positivity, like in their life, some kind of encouragement. Obviously, kids are going to mess up and do things wrong. But I think it means so much to them to be just told, hey, like maybe this is a mistake, but you're still valuable and you're still doing this well. Not sugarcoating anything, but letting a kid know that hey, they still have meaning, and they're still important, to this community, to this family. I know that was super important for me in my life. I would always get really down on myself, and just to have an adult or a parent say like, hey, you're gonna be okay. This is what you're still doing well. Let's move forward here. That really did numbers for my mental health and for my confidence as well. So just offering a little bit of positivity, I think can have a significant impact.
Love it. That unconditional love.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Sue, you've got teenagers in your practice. I have a couple. What is it that you wish that they knew about parenting or parents or about their life right now? What's that one message you might like to give to young people?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for kids, I think I would say you may not like the limits and restrictions that your parents are giving you right now, but one day you might be able to see how they were trying to help and maybe trust that they have some life experiences, they have some wisdom, because they've been through some things. They also have a more developed brain. I mean, that's scientific. So you don't know more than your parents, even though at 13 you think you do. I think I did too. The other thing I think I would say is try to imagine what it would be like if you were the parent. What would you want for your own child? How would you want them to live? What kinds of choices would you want your own child to make day to day? Would you want them taking risks? Would you want them doing impulsive things? Would you want them doing destructive things to their body? Would you want them just vegging out in front of, a TV or electronics? So think about, try to imagine, which I know is hard, but try to imagine you're the parent, you've got this child, and what would you want to do to try to help your child create the most, meaningful, productive, healthy life possible? What kinds of decisions would you make?
Yeah, love it. And I think I would kind of add to that, but maybe give the flip side of that too. And that is, you know, your parents aren't perfect, and
Mhm.
they're learning parenting in real time. They didn't probably take a class about it. They've never done this before. And so if your parents act out in a way that really strikes you as, you know, something that's hard or hurtful, that doesn't ever excuse behavior that's not appropriate. But more often than not, it has nothing to do with you. There are life stressors out there. There are things that happen in their own marriage and their relationships with other kids. Just, you know, going through and becoming an adult is hard anyway. And so you might find that sometimes your parents are less than perfect. And that is just the result of, you know, sometimes being tired, not having enough sleep, being worried about things. So it again does not excuse inappropriate behavior, but it might offer you just a little bit of relief in knowing that that's a part of life too. And it's more often it's not about you.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay, this was awesome. Can we do this again tomorrow? Because then we actually get to talk to our boys every day for an hour. If you are watching or listening, we're going to put the contact information for each of these people into the notes. If you're watching this and you're in Michigan and you want to connect with Devin, feel free to go ahead and do that. If you want to connect with any of the rest of us and you're here in the Missouri area, please go ahead and do that. We'd love to hear more from you, and we hope that you enjoyed this. That's all I got. Anything else from you guys?
Thank
All
you
right.
so
If I can
Thank you,
refine, if I can
everybody.
find the record off button, I will push it. And it was good seeing you all. Thanks for hanging out with us this morning.
Bye.